The alarm on my wrist buzzed 3 times, which meant one thing. The inspection ship from the Valari Council was landing in 20 minutes, and my workshop was the first stop on their tour of the outpost. I dropped my tools, wiped my hands on my jacket, and ran. My name is Callum, and I am the only human technician on this mining station. The Valari agreed to let humans work here after the treaty was signed, but most of them still watch me the way you watch a machine that might explode. Every mistake I make gets written down. Every strange thing I do gets reported. And today, of all days, I could not afford a single strange thing. I had left my tiny dragon, Ember, locked in the workshop for exactly 1 hour, while I fixed a broken relay in the docking bay. Ember was barely the size of a house cat, with wings too small to fly, and a habit of getting into everything. I told her to stay by her blanket and not touch anything. She had tilted her head at me the way she always does, like she understood every word and planned to ignore all of them anyway. I reached the workshop door and pressed my palm against the scanner. It beeped green. My heart was already racing before the door even opened, because I could hear something inside, a soft thumping, a happy little chirp, not the sound of danger, the sound of Ember having the time of her life. The door slid open, and I froze. Every wall was covered in red, not blood red, thankfully, paint red, the same bright red I used to mark hazard containers. It was smeared across the metal panels in shapes I recognized instantly. Hearts, dozens of them. Big clumsy hearts and small crooked hearts, some overlapping, some dripping down toward the floor. They covered the wall above my workbench. They covered the side of my half-built engine core. They even covered the ceiling, which meant she had somehow climbed up there with paint on her claws. In the middle of the room sat Ember, red from nose to tail, tiny wings dripping color, looking incredibly proud of herself. I did not have time to process the emotion building in my chest, because my communicator buzzed again. The inspection team was already inside the station. They were 2 corridors away. I had less than 10 minutes before 3 senior Valari officials walked through that door and saw a workshop that looked like a crime scene painted by a toddler. My mind raced through every possible excuse. I could lock the door and claim a malfunction. I could say the paint was a new marking system for hazardous parts. I could try to scrub the walls in the next few minutes, which was clearly impossible given the size of the mess. Ember chirped again and trotted toward me, leaving small red footprints across the floor. She lifted her front paw and pressed it gently against my leg, right over my heart, like she was trying to show me what she had made. I looked down at her glowing golden eyes, full of nothing but excitement, and something in my chest loosened. I remembered the day before. I had been stressed about a broken thruster and had drawn a small heart on a spare metal panel just to make myself smile. Ember had watched me do it from her blanket, tilting her head the same way she always does when she is studying something new. I had not thought about it again until this exact moment. She had not made a mess. She had copied me. She had spent an hour trying to give me something. The communicator buzzed a 3rd time. I heard footsteps in the corridor outside, heavy and deliberate, the sound Valari boots make on metal floors. There was no time to hide anything. There was no time to explain anything. In seconds, the door would open, and 3 of the most rule-bound beings I had ever met would see my entire workshop covered in paint. I picked Ember up, feeling the wet paint soak into my sleeve, and held her against my chest anyway. If this was going to go badly, I was not going to let her feel like she had done something wrong. The door slid open. 3 Valari stood in the frame. Commander Threll, tall and pale gray, with markings down her cheeks that showed her rank. Beside her stood 2 younger officials, both holding data slates, both already looking past me into the room. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Commander Threll stepped inside first. Her eyes moved slowly across the walls, taking in every heart, every smear, every drop of red that had dried along the metal seams. I braced myself for the questions, for the report that would follow, for the look of disappointment that Valari wear so well, all sharp eyes and flat mouths. Instead, she asked a single question. "What is this?" I opened my mouth to explain, to apologize, to offer to clean it immediately, but before I could say anything, Ember chirped loudly from my arms and stretched her wings out wide, showing off every red streak on her body like a badge of honor. I found myself telling the truth instead of an excuse. I told them Ember had found the paint while I was gone. I told them she had spent the hour covering the room in hearts because she had seen me draw one the day before, and she wanted to give something back. I told them I had no plan to clean it before the inspection, because I had only just found out myself. Commander Threll walked closer to the nearest wall and studied one heart in particular, a small, crooked shape near the floor, clearly one of the first ones Ember had made before she got the hang of it. She reached out one long gray finger and touched the edge of the paint, careful not to smudge it. "On Velar," she said, "we do not have a symbol like this. We have marks for rank, for warning, for ownership. We do not have a mark that means nothing except that you wanted to give it." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. The younger official beside her, the one with fewer markings and a lower rank, leaned toward his data slate and began typing quickly. I assumed he was writing up a violation report. I assumed my time on this station had just gotten a lot shorter. Instead, he turned the slate toward the commander and showed her something. A photograph he had just taken of the wall, hearts and all. Threll studied it for a long moment. Then she looked back at me, and at Ember, still glowing with pride in my arms. "Your species is strange, Callum," she said. "You build engines that could power a city, and yet you let a small creature paint over your work without punishment." I told her the truth again. I told her the workshop could be cleaned, the parts could be rebuilt, but the hour Ember spent making this was something I would never get back if I scrubbed it away in anger. I told her that on my planet, we understand that some things matter more than a clean wall. Threll was quiet for a long time. The other official kept looking between the wall and his slate, still typing notes I could not read. Then Threll did something I did not expect. She smiled. It was small, barely more than a shift in the corners of her mouth, but I had worked alongside the Valari long enough to know that a smile from someone like her was rare. "We will note in our report," she said, "that the human workshop demonstrates unconventional but functional organization." She turned toward the door, then paused and looked back at Ember one more time. "Take care of your small dragon, Callum. Whatever this is that she has given you, it is clearly worth more to you than the walls it is painted on." The inspection team left without a single mark against me. I stood in the middle of my ruined, beautiful, heart-covered workshop, still holding Ember, who had finally started to relax now that the tension in the room had faded. I set her down gently and looked around at the mess properly, for the first time since I had walked in. Now that the fear was gone, I could actually see what she had made. It was not random. Every heart pointed roughly toward the center of the room, toward the spot where my workbench sat, toward the spot where I spent most of my time. She had built the whole room around me without even realizing it. I decided right there that I was not going to clean it all away. I scrubbed the paint off my most important tools and off the parts of the engine core that needed to stay clean for safety, but I left the walls exactly as they were. Red hearts, crooked and uneven, covering nearly every open surface in the room. Word spread through the station faster than I expected. Other workers, both human and Valari, found excuses to walk past my workshop, just to see the walls for themselves. Some of them laughed. A few of the Valari stood in the doorway for a long time, studying the shapes the way Threll had, like they were trying to understand something that did not fit neatly into any category they had. Ember did not understand any of the attention. She just curled up on her blanket in the corner of the room, paint drying on her scales, completely satisfied with what she had done. Every so often she would open one golden eye, check that I was still nearby, and drift back to sleep. I sat down at my workbench that night, surrounded by walls full of hearts, and realized something simple. On a station full of rules and ranks and careful calculations, my tiny dragon had done something none of them expected. She had given without asking for anything in return, and in doing so, she had shown an entire alien crew what it looks like when affection has no cost attached to it. I never did figure out where she found that paint. I never asked. Some mysteries are better left alone, especially when the answer is painted across every wall you own. From that day forward, whenever new workers arrived at the station, they were always shown my workshop first. Not because of my engines or my repairs, but because of the hearts. The Valari never fully understood why I kept them there. I did not need them to understand. I just knew that every morning when I walked through that door, the first thing I saw was proof that somebody loved me enough to make a mess for it, and no report, no inspection, and no rule on any world was ever going to make me regret that.